Should we get started? We'll get started in a minute as we go on. Just make sure if you want to grab anything, make sure you grab something. Press, we're feeding you today, so please go out and get something to eat. You want to put that there? Okay. What do you think? So let me just, before I get started, I just want to, first of all, thank everyone for coming this morning. I want to thank President Wu and the Boston City Council for being here. Obviously, I want to give a special thanks to Bill Linehan today. This is his last budget breakfast. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for your years of service here. Just for the record, Mark Siomo took all the money from Southie for Brighton. So I want to thank you, Billy. I also want to thank all of the staff here, in budget staff, both here in the city council as well, and also the school department. You know, we have a great budget, great times we're living in. I was just talking to Councilor Campbell in the hallway. In my time in politics, I got sworn in 20 years ago next week as a state representative, and in that time as a state rep, we had 3 downturns in the economy. They were difficult because when I first got elected, it was 1997, and we had a lot of money around at that time. And I remember the first supplemental budget, I was 3 months in office, and I was able to get money for renovation of the 4 red line stations in Dorchester. That was a big issue back then. I was able to get money for Pope John Paul Park, Pope John Paul Extension. We were able to do incredible investments in the Commonwealth, throughout the Commonwealth. 9/11 happened. After 9/11, we had a big downturn in the economy, and it was my first time as an elected official really looking at this stuff. And at that point, we had started the rainy day fund. Really, the rainy day funds that we have here in the city, the state started it, and they didn't have them back then. And we cut billions of dollars out of the budget. But we also use billions of dollars in the rainy day fund to stop the bleeding, if you will. Got the economy back on track. A couple of years later, we went through another downturn, and it happened 2 other times. So when you think about where we are as a city, for the last 3 years, we've benefited from a very strong economy. And it's easier to put a budget together. Even though we might have arguments and disagreements of where the money gets allocated, we always have to prepare for the future. And certainly in this budget, I think we have done that. We're spending responsibly, but we're also preparing for the inevitable where there will be a downturn in the economy. And I know many of the councils, and Billy's seen it, Sal's seen it, Mark's seen it, I think most of the councils have seen it. When there's a downturn in the economy, it's not fun because the choices get very difficult. The choices between do we put money into public safety, do we put money into education, do we put money into parks and recreation? Do we put money into public works? So as we move forward here in this budget, I feel that we do have a good, strong budget. We're also going to deliver the capital budget next week separately. It's something a little different we're doing this year. Last year we kind of put it all in one area, and this year we're going to separate a little bit. We also, our historic plans like Imagine Boston 2030 and Build BPS change the conversation on our capital investments. So we're working to put that budget together because for the first time in a long time, as a city collectively, we're going to make a large investment in our schools. Our plan that we put out the other day is going to make $1 billion investment in our school facility buildings. And you know, when you think about education, we talk a lot about what happens in the classroom, and that's important. But it's also important for us to make sure that our kids learn in the 21st century environment. I know the council, many of you are in schools every day. When you go into those schools, great things are happening in those schools. We have great teachers, we have great leaders, we have great kids, we have great parents, but they're learning in situations where they put paintings on the walls, and a lot of times those paintings are on the walls to show the art of the kids, but also to cover what's behind those. So we need to continue to make those investments. I want to just point out a few other people. I want to thank David Sweeney and Katie Hammer for their great work in this budget and their team, who've done some incredible things. I want to thank Superintendent Tommy Chang and Eleanor Lawrence of the Boston Public Schools, who are really doing innovative things, who last year started talking about looking at the budget in a different way. We used to looking at the budget in the school department year to year to year to year, but now they're looking at the budget long term, so they can make the investments and make the changes as they work them through. So I want to thank them for their work. This budget is a $3.14 billion operating budget. It represents $143.7 million, or 4.8% growth. This budget builds on 3 years of smart, responsible, sustainable financial stability. It started making sure that our taxpayers know this, we've earned us a AAA bond rating for 4 years in a row. That's the first time in the history of our city that we've been able to do it. Never mind 2 years in a row, but 4 years in a row. And that's because of the work collectively that we do together. Today, the budget team put the budget together, but the council's going to look at that budget, and they're going to talk about making changes and adjustments in that budget. So as we continue to think about forward, as I said when I started talking this morning, when you think about the bad economy of 2001 and 2008 and 2010, the AAA bond rating helps us through a difficult time. This budget also reflects a continual use of data to improve performance and saving money. We're using more and more data every single day. And that data is proof point that it does make a difference. And we're seeing an opportunity for us to continue to make smart investments. This budget ultimately reflects the faith in Boston's future. It provides safety and quality of life. And we're going to continue to grow our opportunities, not just for some people in the city. This budget helps us grow it for all people in the city of Boston, and making sure that they continue to move forward. This budget invests in city services. We have the Hokey program, where we have the street cleaning program. It's called Hokey, where we have in a couple areas of the city of Boston. We are putting full-time street cleaners on our streets in every district, making sure that people have them in the community year-round. We're bringing back library services to Chinatown, something that Chinatown's been asking for a long time. This budget reflects that. We're also, in this budget, we're making sure that our lane markings and crosswalks are going to be completely redone in the city of Boston. We spoke about that. We've had an increase in accidents. We've had an increase in deaths of people, pedestrians. So what we're going to do now is make sure that we repaint our streets, re-sign our streets, to make sure that our streets reflect what we want to do, part of our Vision Zero plan. We're going to renovate our ball fields. We have a capital plan that you know with Parks and Recreation that we're going around the city of Boston, but we're making an investment in the actual ball fields and the infields of our Little League. We're going to do it over a 3-year period where we're going to take up every infield and redo them so our Little Leagues and our softball leagues can have, when I talk about not necessarily for the adults, for the kids, have a good playing surface to play on, like they do when they go to the suburbs. We have to make sure that our kids in Boston have an opportunity to play on a good field. We're also investing in social and economic mobility with the tools that we're going to give people to help them thrive. First and foremost, that means a $1.8 billion investment. No, I said that wrong. Did I say that wrong? Yeah. $1.80 billion investment. Dave Sweeney nearly had a heart attack, and Tito Jackson nearly started doing jumping jacks. That's a $40 million, but let me just tell you, it's still a $40 million increase in our school budget, which isn't small investment. That includes $14 million to extend the school day for 15,000 more students to the rest of our schools. So 60 of our schools in Boston will have extended day. That includes another $600 million expansion for high-quality pre-kindergarten. As we work with our legislative partners to get $16 million somewhere down the road, we're going to continue to expand universal pre-kindergarten until we make sure that every 4-year-old in this city has an opportunity to go to school. That means $715,000 to bring rigorous curriculum to 5th graders at 13 schools to close the opportunity gap. So we're making the investment in those schools that people say we left behind. That's another $1.2 million to support 3,000 homeless students, understanding that we have an issue with our homeless students, and we're working, coordinating better with the state, because the state is responsible for family homelessness to put them in homes, so we're working with them to make the investment. It's a $16 million for schools with declining enrollment. We're putting $16 million more in. That's $1.25 million for new reserve for enrollment. In housing, we're making investments in housing. For the first time this budget season, we're going to collect revenue from the Community Preservation Act for affordable housing, open space, and historic preservation. And I look forward to, we're working with the council now, Council Flaherty and his team, as they're working to create, how do we create this, the Community Preservation Act board. We're going to devote city funds to the Housing Innovation Lab to find solutions for the middle-class housing. This budget invests $75,000 in the Office of Housing Stability to prevent evictions and homelessness. We can talk about putting money into a situation, but our Office of Housing Stability is going to work to make sure how do we keep people in homes. We also contains more than $25 million of work to continue ending chronic homelessness and turning our shelter system into a rapid rehousing system. We're also adding $200,000 for veterans to fill the gaps in federal services to expand supportive housing. And I just want to talk just real quickly about the homeless situation in Boston. We've seen a reduction in homelessness, but we're still seeing more and more folks come into our city. These folks don't start in Boston. They start in other areas, so we're going to work with the state to make sure that they look to build up their shelter system around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But something that all of us in this room should be happy and grateful for is that there are over 1,100 people that 3 years ago this morning were chronically homeless living on the street. And 3 years later, they're living in an apartment. They're living in, they have a kitchen, they have a living room, they have a bathroom, they have furniture. That's all of our work. That's all of our work collectively. So no matter what we do here as elected officials, and sometimes, you know, we shoot for the stars and some of the things, that's the stuff that I think all of us eventually ran for in the beginning, to help people. So you should be out there talking about that. You know, and we're seeing those numbers come down, and we're going to continue to move forward. Our goal is to end chronic homelessness by the year 2018. And when I say our goal, that's not Marty Walsh's goal. That's all of our goal. And last year we were able to end chronic veterans homelessness. So if we can do it for chronic veterans, we can do it for all chronic homelessness. And we'll be one of the only cities in America that can do that. So I want to thank you for your help there. In public safety, this year homicides are down 50%. Total major crime is down 12. That's progress. But it's still, we had a 6-year-old boy shot the other night. We still have too much violence in certain parts of our city. So we're not going to let up. We're going to continue to move forward to improve and help those neighborhoods. And we have to. It's our responsibility. This budget adds 20 more cadets, Boston Police cadets, to further the goal of the police departments that fully reflects the residents. We have 40 cadets on right now. They're doing an incredible job. You'll start to see them more out in the street. We have a training class that's graduating. Once that new recruit class graduates, those cadets are going to go and get more training, so we're going to see them on the street. But they're already doing stuff. On Saturday, we had, Dan Conley had what's called a Dormus Climb, which was to support the Child Advocacy Center. And all of the cadets were there. And they were there, and they were proud to be there. So I want to thank them for that. We're also going to make some investments in our fire department. We have a large number of cancer-related deaths, both for retirees and active members of the Boston Fire Department. Sat with the commissioner. We talked about it. We said, how do we cut down on these deaths? How can we cut down? And the commissioner has done some incredible work on this, along with Richie Paris. But the commissioner came back to us and said, one of the things we have to do is that our firehouses are old, so we're working on a patent to fix our firehouses, but to build 28 new firehouses is going to take a lot of resources, a lot of capital. So in this budget, we invest in industrial cleaning at our firehouses to reduce cancer. We literally go into our firehouses and we take everything out and we clean it from top to bottom. And we replace some of the furniture in there to make sure that our fire department and the people that work in our fire department, when they go back to the firehouse, they're not going back to an area that could cause cancer for them. We want to bring them a clean space. Addiction and treatment. We know the work that we've done over the last couple of years with 311. Last year we expanded the 311 line to cover addiction services so anyone can call in. We're also going to, in our PATS program, we're also going to work to fund a community assistance team to respond to 911 calls at Recovery Road and Boston Common. our biggest areas. And these recovery teams will be able to be used eventually throughout the city of Boston where we see increase of drug use. And these teams are actually going to go out, and some of them are working right now out on Melina Katz Boulevard and Mass Ave. And if you get a chance to walk with them, they know everyone by first name. They know their problems, their situations, what's going on. So we're working to expand that program and to get out there. This budget advances diversity and equity. It directs city funds to continue our work in the Office of Resiliency and Racial Equity. We had a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation that we're able to create this office. That grant is going to expire this year. This budget picks up that office to keep that office moving forward, something that's important for us in the city. It funds proactive recruitment for the Office of Diversity, and it funds digital equity grant program to close the gaps in internet access. Much of this work puts us in the national conversation: policing, homelessness, schools, recovery service, but it all starts in Boston's neighborhoods with a simple goal of making government work for all the people. You don't have to build a budget by swinging an axe and cutting lifelines like the White House is doing. That's not what we're doing here in the city of Boston. You do it by believing in your community in the future, and you make the investments in our communities in the future. As I said in the very beginning, it's probably likely that we're going to face some fiscal challenges caused by whatever federal action Washington takes. Whether that's a threat of taking money away from us because we protect the immigrants, or we protect the vulnerable, or whether that's just by people putting a budget together in Washington that doesn't understand the needs of the American people, or whether that's by the actions of the White House that puts our economy in a spiral. We're going to be prepared for that. We're going to make sure that we're going to work with our legislature. We're going to make sure that we continue to work to bring and continue to fund the programs that are important to us. It's important also for us to continue to advocate down in Washington, D.C., even though we have a White House that doesn't have the same values as our city. It's important for us to continue to work and build relationships down there because there's a lot at stake. We have public safety money, we have education money, and we have housing money, something that's really important for all of us. But I'm confident, whatever happens, we're putting Boston in the best possible position to survive and thrive for many years to come. I want to thank you, all of you, for the work that you're undertaking with us as partners. I look forward to working with you as we continue through this budget season with your input and with ideas. And again, I just want to thank all of you. President Wu, thank you for your leadership, and to all particularly all the staff that's here today, that's behind the scenes. Thank you. I mean, we get all the credit, or we get all the criticism. I don't mind the criticism, but you should get the credit because you've put an incredible budget together. Thank you very much. And now I think I turn it over to David Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of the City Council, for being here for this important phase, the kickoff of an important phase of the FY18 budget process as we move towards City Council hearings. I'd also like to thank our Budget Director, Katie Hammer, and her team for their leadership through this process, as well as and also, I think they get much less credit than they deserve, but our cabinet chiefs and department heads also play an integral part to developing these budget proposals and then implementing the initiatives that we actually fund from year to year. So I want to thank them too. This budget proposal, as that the mayor just referenced, reflects reality. In summary, local revenue sources are growing by a robust 5.5%, comprising about 93% of overall revenue growth in the budget. But the extraordinary revenue growth produced in the city is mitigated by state aid growth of just 2.5%, leaving our state aid levels in 2018 below 2008 levels still. On the spending side, we propose to use every dollar of the $144 million in growth we project for 2018. However, after pension, debt service, charter school, and collective bargaining increases are accounted for, just $63 million of that growth remains to fund cost increases and new investments at over 40 city departments, including schools. Even with our strong economy, getting to a balanced FY18 budget is going to require work. This budget proposal before you has put in that work and does represent a balanced budget, although we know there will likely be adjustments through the City Council process. But only because of the city's diligence in finding ways to reduce its costs are we able to continue to make new investments across city departments, and in particular in this budget at BPS and public safety departments. So we have a PowerPoint presentation here up on the screen in front of you. As Mayor Walsh said, the FY18 proposed budget is $3.14 billion and balances sustainability, increased investment, and fiscal responsibility, maintaining high levels of investment in education and public safety. It builds off of our efforts in past budgets by expanding smart savings initiatives that avoid $60 million in costs that we're able to reinvest in programming in FY18. Also continues the city's commitment to addressing its long-term liabilities and builds on the administration's record of strong fiscal management. This is something that has been affirmed as recently as late February of 2017 by our bond rating agencies, when we again received a AAA bond rating. And these independent rating agencies, I pulled out some comments reflective of the overall statements they made about the city's debt when they issued their ratings in February. So the rating agencies say that the AAA rating reflects the city's strong fiscal management and stable financial position, and they view Boston's management environment as very strong. The city's tax base has seen unprecedented gains in the past few years, with the biggest expansion in history, with new development contributing to a very strong new growth. Unemployment continues to be a strength, as it remains very favorable at 2.5% relative to our peers, below the Commonwealth at 2.8%, and the US at 4.5%. The rating agencies also note the pressures that the city has on its financial picture, noting that net state assessments have continued to decline, and this has placed pressure on growth of local source revenues to maintain budgetary balance. I think that statement actually perfectly captures the picture of where we stand in FY18. We continue to face budgetary pressures because of increases in pension and healthcare costs and increasing charter school tuition assessments, and state aid continues to be a challenge to the city's financial operations given the increase in state assessments for charter school tuition. More so than any other year that I've been involved in putting budgets together at the city and state level, instability at the federal level is playing a role in how we plan for the coming fiscal year and the coming fiscal years. Federal budget proposals, very unknown as to what will happen with regard to President Trump's initial budget proposal, but the city does receive over $500 million a year if you include Boston Housing Authority in federal funds, almost $300 million to BHA alone. The schools receive over $100 million in federal funds, public health over $35 million that fund programs such as HIV. DND receives over $50 million in federal funds, over half of which I believe are CDBG funds that are on the table apparently to be cut, and public safety receives about $20 million in annual federal funding. We have seen proposals to eliminate community development block grants and reduce education grants for after school and those that serve students in poverty. There's also some uncertainty about whether our status relative to immigration, how we treat immigrants in the city, could potentially impact federal funds as well. It's also possible that the trend of federal divestment from public housing could deepen, and at the state level, we continue to struggle with the Commonwealth's underfunding of the charter tuition reimbursement line. So while cities can't afford to replace the level of cuts that are being contemplated in some corners in the federal government, we believe our disciplined financial practices have better positioned us to manage through these changes, particularly at the federal level. I should note that with regard to our state aid, we're also hearing rumors potentially that our unrestricted general government aid could go down from what the governor initially proposed through the legislative process as well. In terms of revenue, the picture of looking at it from this angle is relatively similar to how it has been the past couple of years. Our overall revenue is comprised of 69% property tax, and 70% of our recurring revenue now comes from the property tax. That's about $2.2 billion of our $3.1 billion in revenue from a single source. Obviously, so we are projecting FY18 and FY17 to be the two largest years of property tax growth in the city's history, and that's reflected in this budget as well. We're also projecting $441 million in state aid. This reflects the House 1 proposal from the governor, which obviously could go up or down through the legislative process. And this remains $53 million below the level of state aid we were receiving in 2008. We project about $189 million in revenue from excises and $66 million from licenses and permits as well. In terms of property tax growth, the blue bar on this graph shows the increment raised each year that's allowable under Proposition 2.5, so a 2.5% increase on the existing property tax base. And the red bar shows what we project, what we received and what we project for FY18 for new growth. So as you can see, we're projecting the second highest year of new growth in the city's history, behind only the current year. And this is the largest amount we've ever projected for our initial budget in terms of property tax growth. That $124 million in FY17 reflects about $30 million in increased property tax revenue that we weren't expecting at this time last year for FY17, but that amount is now rolled into our base for FY18. So overall, 3/4 of the revenue growth we're expecting in FY18 comes from net property tax growth. This is, like I said, this is the first time we've ever cracked the $100 million growth mark in terms of how we've budgeted. We are again assuming that we will raise the full amount allowed under Prop 2.5 as well, and that's the $52 million on the bar on the right in blue. So I think it's important to note that while we have seen robust increases in values with property tax, and we've seen very strong growth with property tax revenue, we do not experience the full benefit of property value increase through our tax levy because of Proposition 2.5. And so in a nutshell, whether property values decrease overall by 20% or increase by 20%, the city can still raise its levy by 2.5%, up to 2.5%. And this 4-year period shown here is a very good illustration, I think, of the impact of Proposition 2.5. If you look at FY16, for instance, the growth in assessed value in the city was almost 16%, and yet the property tax growth was 5% because of Proposition 2.5. So we have had our 4 highest years of new growth during this period shown on the graph, with appreciation of existing property values as well as new construction growth. And though there's been 44% growth in value, with overall property value in the city growing in during this period from $100 billion to $144 billion, we've only seen 25% growth in actual tax levy because of Prop 2.5. And the difference between that number and what we would have raised if tax levy had increased with value is about $300 million a year. Our recurring revenue picture has been moving in the same direction for about a decade and a half now. And as you can see, prior to the last 2 recessions, we received about half of our revenue from the property tax and about a third from state aid. In FY08, we received $493 million in state aid and now project to receive $441 million in state aid 10 years later. So aid is actually down about 12% over the last decade, while our budget has grown by 36% overall. And this has required roughly a 1-for-1 replacement of property tax dollars for state aid dollars that have gone away. And if state aid had just kept pace with overall growth, we'd have about $175 million more per year in our budget. This structure, obviously, of being dependent on one source of revenue for 70% of our budget is an anomaly relative to our peers. If you look at a city like New York or many cities nationwide, they have income taxes, sales taxes, business taxes, property taxes. We're pretty much reliant now for over 2/3 of our budget on one major broad-based tax, and now about 14% on local aid from the state. This picture is actually compounded by the fact that while the amount of revenue we receive every year from the state continues to go down, the amount we are charged by the state continues to increase. So on average, during the period shown here from 2008 to what we're projecting for 2018, we've lost about $19 million per year in net aid, and that includes an $8 million projected decline for FY18. The $189 million is a combination of $52 million less in revenue and $137 million more being charged to us for state assessments, $120 million of that for our charter school assessment increase. In the area in which our aid picture problem is most acute is education aid. So while Boston's spending on education has increased substantially, state education funding has not kept pace. From 2014 to 2018, we increased spending on education in Boston by $206 million, yet our total state aid for education actually declined by about $1 million. Chapter 70 has grown by $8 million over that period, but our charter reimbursement has gone down by $9, and we're now projecting to receive the amount we received in 2010 for Chapter 70 in 2018 for the first time. We finally got back to $217 million in Chapter 70 if that number holds through the budget process. So we're projecting about 0.6% growth in what the state provides us for aid for our public education system, $1.3 million compared to the $58 million more we propose to invest in education in FY18. And again, one of the challenges Boston has is its large number of charter school students and how to budget around that. So we project to have about 10,600 charter students in 2018, and under state statute, the city is supposed to be reimbursed for a portion of its costs related to students attending charter schools. This reimbursement peaked at about $33 million in 2014, and we now project this number to be at about $23 million in FY18, representing a $25 million shortfall in this line item. To put that into some context, over this period, our assessment for charter students has grown by about $65 million annually, but we've actually seen a $10 million decline from 2014 to 2018 and what we will see for reimbursement in all likelihood. And so although we avoided the fundamental financial change that could have been caused by the passage of Question 2, our charter assessment and reimbursement continues to be a major financial challenge for the city. And with that, we have made some attempts to address these issues that we have through legislation. The mayor has filed comprehensive education finance reform legislation that would free up dollars to be reinvested in BPS. In the short term, these proposals would increase annual funding to Boston by $35 million. In the long term, could position us for an additional $150 million per year if the state makes a transformational financial investment in education, something like the millionaire's tax or one of those other items that's been discussed on Beacon Hill. And this additional revenue would support, comes in multiple areas. One would use $16.5 million to provide a high-quality free pre-K seat to every student in Boston. Ron Dorsey's group and the UPK task force identified a shortfall of about 1,350 seats, quality seats in kindergarten in the city. And we estimate with $16.5 million we could close that gap completely. We're proposing to use $16.5 million in annual surplus funds currently going into the convention center fund that are generated exclusively in Boston for this purpose. We also propose to fix the charter school transition funding model by moving to a direct funding model of charter schools and reducing the reimbursement period from 6 years to 3 years, shifting facilities costs to the MSBA, and fixing a quirk in the way that we're assessed for our charter students that costs us a couple $1 million a year. We also propose to make more of our special ed costs eligible for reimbursement through the state circuit breaker program by reducing the threshold over which 75% of costs are reimbursed from 4 times average per pupil cost to 3 times the average per pupil cost. And then, like I said, we've made a proposal to complement the legislation that passed the state Senate last year that would essentially direct funding to communities like Boston, potentially provide $150 million more in revenue if that revenue became available at the state level. All of this ties into our approach continuing our approach of fiscal responsibility that's been affirmed multiple times by independent sources. These strategies include conservative budgeting, cost containment, database management, revenue maximization, long-term planning, and general strong fiscal management. The budget that Katie's going to talk about in a few minutes continues to build on the record that the city has built over the last couple of decades, and that has been accelerated over the last couple of years, continuing to reduce overtime where possible, eliminate vacant budgeted positions, and implementing and expanding on other cost-saving measures. Those savings initiatives are what allow us to make new investments in the budget. Without that, there would be no money to spend on new investments. And we're also launching this year some new revenue initiatives to better maximize local receipt revenue, including engaging third parties to validate some of our revenue sources, such as permits and cable billing and that type of thing. And again, we're continuing to budget in a conservative manner, particularly given the outstanding unknowns this year. Overall, the pie has not changed on the spending side all that much in 1 year either. 40% of our $3.14 billion budget is going to education, about $1.081 billion to BPS, and $175 million through our charter assessment. $600 million is being spent on public safety, primarily in police and fire. $550 million on fixed costs and other appropriations, $200 million on city, a little over $200 million on city health insurance, $150 million or so in the streets cabinet, $79 million at public health, $27 million in a reserve for collective bargaining on the city side, and then the 40 or so other city departments essentially split the remaining $250 million in spending. In terms of growth, FY18 expenditures are projected to grow by almost $144 million, a pretty healthy 4.8% overall growth, and that reflects 4% appropriation growth, but 8% fixed cost growth in areas like debt service, charter assessment, and pensions. Of that growth, about 40% is dedicated to education, with between BPS and charters, education growing by the largest amount, $58 million. We're also projecting we are proposing that 38% of growth be given to other city services, about $54 million. And in particular, we are seeing public safety costs growing by 3.5% within that, in addition to the collective bargaining costs that we have as well. Another way to look at growth that I think is useful is in this manner, about $144 million in growth, but right off the top, 81 million of that is unavailable for spending on new investments because 50 million is automatically set aside for fixed cost growth, and then we're budgeting for $31 million in collective bargaining growth, leaving only between $60 and $65 million available for overall cost increases unrelated to these purposes. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor to talk about the area of the budget that is growing by the largest dollar amount and that comprises the largest share of our budget. Oh, Tommy, I guess Superintendent Chang is going to have a couple words to say about BPS budget first.
Morning, everyone. Morning. I'm going to make some comments before Eleanor, the Chief Financial Officer of Boston Public Schools, comes up. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank the city of Boston for continuing to invest in education. Our budget this year does include a $40 million increase over last year. And despite great uncertainty with the federal government and declining state aid, the city continues to invest in education. This is by far the largest budget for Boston Public Schools in its history. It provides most of its monies directly to schools. There will be a $25 million increase of direct funding to schools in this upcoming budget. And it provides, most importantly, more learning time for young people in the city of Boston. Next year, we will fully implement extended learning time to a total of 57 schools, and that's over 23,000 students that will be served by 40 additional minutes over the course of just 3 short years. The BPS budget always elicits lively debate because everyone is so passionate about education in the city of Boston. But we are making the right investments. We are doing what is right to close opportunity achievement gaps. Our 4-year graduation rate is at its highest point ever, 72.4%. And also for first time ever, we will have more level 1 and 2 schools, a total of 46, than our other tiers. This budget is about equity, it is about coherence, it is about innovation, it is also about making sure that we are planning long-term, not only for short-term. We're making a $1.3 million investment in career technical education. We're continuing to invest in early education. We're making a $1.4 million investment directly to schools to serve our students who are experiencing homelessness. We will continue investing in Excellence for All, which raises the rigor for 4th through 6th graders and also provide some additional enrichment. We will continue to invest in our Opportunity Achievement Gap Office and our Office of Equity. So we've done all this in the last 6 months to produce a budget that is fair and it's equitable, and we will continue to provide the resources our students need to be successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor and Lawrence to give more of the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to provide a brief overview of how we propose spending $1,081,000,000. Broadly speaking, we think about the BPS budget in 3 categories. The first is direct school expenses. So this is money that appears directly on a school budget, as well as our investment in extended learning time. As you'll see here, we're proposing an increase in this critical area of almost 4%. This is where you'll see our investment in extending the school day, in supporting students who are experiencing homelessness, expanding vocational options for our high school students, and adding more students in K-1. Then the second broad category of our spending is what we call school services budgeted centrally. These are people and things you see when you walk around a school, but they happen to sit on a central line item. These are things like transportation, the portion of special education that we fund centrally, facilities, etc. This important area of spending is also going up at about 2.5%. The last category is our central administration. At about 6% of our overall total budget, this is the only area of spending that is going down. It's going down by over 5%. As Dr. Chang referenced, long-term financial planning has been a critical element of our work. It was one of the first initiatives Dr. Chang launched when he took over for the Boston Public Schools, and it's thanks to the operational efficiencies both at central office and in transportation and running really tight that is helping to enable the investments that we're proposing this year, in addition to the unprecedented $40 million increase overall in the BPS appropriation. I'll turn it over now to Katie Hammer.
Thanks, Eleanor. Another portion of our education cost increase is in our charter school assessment. It's important to understand that we have little to no control over our charter school assessment. Over the past several years, since FY11, we've seen our charter school assessment grow by an average of 14% each year. And this year, we're expecting it to go up 17.5 million. That's to serve 10,600 students And for each of those students, we're paying $16,300. We're also making investments in our public safety. This budget maintains high levels of support for educating our students and for keeping our city safe. Our public safety costs are rising by $20.5 million to $606 million this year. A large portion of that has to do with 75 firefighters moving off of a SAFER grant and onto the operating budget. We've seen savings over the past few years by having these firefighters on the SAFER grant, and this year, with that ending, we're now having to absorb those costs onto the operating budget. The Boston Police Department has contractual increases budgeted in their appropriation. They're one of the few departments that has completed collective bargaining agreements, and so we're seeing their costs rise for that reason as well. These two departments have committed to making overtime reforms that have reduced overtime costs, and in the FY18 budget, we're assuming that this will save us $13 million. We're also making targeted investments in safety, health, and diversity. We're very excited to have an additional 20 cadets come on to help our pipeline to have a more diverse police force. We also will have recruit classes in the fire department and in the police department, with 100 recruits set to begin in August of 2017 for the largest police class in recent years. The fire department will receive 13 new apparatus as part of the enhanced fire apparatus replacement plan that we launched last year. And as the mayor mentioned, we're also launching this industrial cleaning pilot to scrub 4 to 5 firehouses. So that leaves another 42 departments who are growing by, an average of 1.5%. 23 of these departments actually have declining budgets this year, which is not that unsurprising because most their collective bargaining costs are located in central collective bargaining reserves. We're also really proud of the reforms that we've made over this administration to achieve smart savings initiatives. In this budget, we'll see $60 million in costs avoided. We're eliminating more positions this year, and with what we did last year and those that we're eliminating this year, we're seeing $5 million in cost avoided. We're continuing our overtime reduction reforms and extending that to the Parks Department as well. Thanks to our PEC agreement that we completed a few years ago, we're seeing $10 million in health insurance savings this year. We also are really proud of some investments that we've made in LEDs for our streetlights that this year will save us $6 million. BPS has achieved savings in their central office and in their transportation department. We're also really pleased by an investment that we made last year in EMTs that will allow us to reduce EMS overtime and increase EMS revenue for a net savings of $4 million. Health insurance costs are rising again this year. Even though our health care cost containment reforms from the PEC agreements have tamped down those cost increases, we're still continuing to see that growth. We're projecting a 5% increase in this budget. But like I said, that is lower than it otherwise would have been if it not for the healthcare cost containment reforms that we've seen over the past few years. One of the challenges that Boston and many other cities across the country have is that we have unfunded liabilities from underfunding from previous generations. That means that our pension schedule rises at almost 9% each year. That means that in this budget alone, our pension is growing by $19 million. This is just one of our fixed costs, which on average are growing by 8%. We are also contributing $40 million again this year to our OPEB liability. That's our other post-employment benefits liability. This is to help, these are crucial to our bond rating and important investments in making sure that we reverse years of underinvestment from the past. We are extremely proud of the investments we're able to make in this budget. And again, that's thanks to the cost savings efforts that our departments across the city have done. I think the largest and most important investment that you've heard about today once, but I'm going to say it another time, is a $14 million investment in allowing 15,000 more students at 39 schools to receive 120 more hours of extended learning time. That is the largest investment that we are making in this budget, and that is a critical, critical investment. That is the equivalent of adding 20 school days each year. This is added to the schools that have already come online in previous years, to a total investment of $19 million that we are spending on extended learning times at our schools. This is a research-backed investment that we think will help us close achievement gaps, and I really want to make sure that everyone in this room knows what an important investment this is. We also have some other targeted investments in closing the achievement gaps that were mentioned previously. Superintendent Chang's Excellence for All program is already showing results by providing rigorous education to fourth graders, and we're now going to expand that to fifth graders in 13 schools. We are also, we have $1.2 million going to 3,000 students who have been identified as being homeless. And we will also see more than 100 pre-kindergarten students at BPS this year. This builds on the reforms that Mayor Walsh has been proposing each year and is part of his long-term goal of providing high-quality access to pre-kindergarten for all 4-year-olds. Oops. A little bit of a lag here. There we go. We are extremely excited about some of our streets investments. We are launching a multi-year campaign to bring all crosswalks, lane markings, and bike lanes into a state of good repair. This is a critical part of Go Boston 2030 and also part of keeping our intersections safe and providing greater access for our people. And we are very, very excited by this program that involves both operating and capital investments. Mayor Walsh noted that we are adding 6 full-time Hokies, 1 for each of Boston's 10 public works districts, to make sure city streets in every neighborhood are clean. Again, we are extremely focused on basic city services here, and this is just further evidence of that. I also want to mention that on this Hokies item, this is something we hear a lot about from city councilors, so I want to thank you for your proposal here. We think this is going to do wonders for each of your districts. For housing, we have made some incredible improvements in housing our homeless over the past several years. We have housed 842 homeless veterans since July of 2014 and put an end to chronic veteran homelessness in Boston. We are furthering that goal by investing $150,000 in general funds to provide support services for veterans not eligible for VA programs. There's an additional $50,000 in federal funding that will also go along with that program. Mayor also mentioned the Office of Housing Stability was established in FY17 to assist residents experiencing housing crisis and expand the array of anti-displacement services that the city offers. Since July of 2014, a total of 2,521 households were able to retain their housing as a result of these city services, such as foreclosure and eviction prevention. And this year, we're going to add $75,000 to allow the Office of Housing Stability to offer training for both landlords and tenants, develop a tenant orientation guide, and funding for families in need of emergency placement. We have this police class that our police cadet class I mentioned a little bit ago. We'll create that pipeline. We are also piloting new digital equity grant program to explore ways to address digital equity gaps in the city of Boston. Roughly 15% of Bostonians lack internet access at home, and we feel like this will be a way for us to explore addressing those digital equity gaps. We also have our data analytics team was created in 2015 and has already proven success. They have helped us better identify health violations, supported Vision Zero, and delivered information about building hazards to firefighters before they arrive on scene. In the future, data analytics will build on that success, such as looking at more efficient ways to process 311 requests. One investment that we're making is we're trying to do a rotation of small renovations to neighborhood ball fields to keep them safe and playable between major renovations. This will help, I don't know if you've ever been in a batter box, but sometimes they get holes. This will help us make sure that those are filled in, that kids remain safe. This is one of those, again, basic city services to make sure that we have quality ball fields for our kids and for our leagues. We are extremely excited to restore library services to Chinatown. This has been a high priority for members of that community, and after 54 years without a branch. And we're continuing groundbreaking investments in the arts, which were launched last year. That's residency programs for artists, an artist resource manager to help artists navigate municipal services, and a small grant program to help support our artists. Mayor Walsh has dedicated increased resources to helping those in need of substance abuse and addiction supports. We have added 55 clinicians, outreach workers, homeless caseworkers, coordinators, and other recovery staff at the Boston Health Commission. Last year, the mayor launched 311 for recovery services. And this graph shows the success that we're already seeing from that investment. Due to this, we've seen 50% increase in calls, 74% increase in walk-ins, and the number of patients seeking accessing services has doubled. Building on that success, in FY18, we'll make new investments to allow paths to be open on evenings and weekends. We're also really excited about a data-driven investment that the data analytics team and EMS worked on together. Through the data analytics, they found that there were particular 911 incident types that did not require transport. These calls were focused on the Boston Common and Recovery Road area. And so EMS and the data analytics team has developed a new approach to better serve these areas. They will provide community assistance teams they are comprised of EMTs that will be deployed on rotating schedules in non-transport vehicles to triage call types in these areas. We think this will result in better patient outcomes and also allow us to reduce response times. We are also, like I mentioned earlier, piloting industrial level cleaning for firehouses to reduce cancer risks for our firefighters. The city's data-driven investment and spending reform approach to budgeting illustrates an alternative approach than what we're seeing at the federal level. Through this budget, Mayor Walsh preserves and expands offerings to our most vulnerable residents. We're investing deeply in education to close opportunity and achievement gaps. Let me say it one more time, $14 million to extend learning time for 15,000 more students. We are continuing our reforms that we launched last year, position elimination, overtime reduction targets, and other savings measures that were recently, our bond rating agencies recently said we're good to go. We are also addressing our long-term obligations, and we are launching revenue initiatives to maximize our local receipt revenue. All of these disciplined financial practices position us to manage through our federal instability. Finally, I just want to thank the budget team, Jim Williamson, Ellen Hatch, Jack Hanlon, Mary McCoy, and the rest of the budget team back at OBM. They've worked really hard to put this budget together, and I'm really proud of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to others for other questions.
Can I ask, before we take any questions, I'd like to ask the President of the Council, should I say a few words on behalf of the Council?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. I don't know which department's budget the breakfast comes out of, but it seems to be getting nicer every year, so I think that's a good sign. I want to thank you, Mayor, for your commitment to using the budget process as a way to further fiscal responsibility for the city and also equity, and echo your thanks to all your department heads and chiefs for the work that has gone into this rigorous process. I also want to thank my colleagues, the counselors, and particularly our Ways and Means Chairman, Councillor Siomo, who will be leading us through the next couple of months. Every year I learn so much from my colleagues as everyone really digs in over this period and asks the tough questions and gets at the collaboration to make sure we're thinking about not just the numbers, but the people behind the numbers and a better plan for the city of Boston. I know that this year, as previous years, we will have a conversation that is honest and frank, that is comprehensive and ultimately collaborative. And finally, I just want to say, we all know that the end of the fiscal year is June 30th. I'm just going to throw out there, my due date is July 7th, so let's get this done on time. Thank you.
I'll take a motion right now to support the budget. We move on. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, everyone. Any questions from the press? I know there's going to be plenty of time to dissect this, but any questions? Or anyone? With that, enjoy the day.